How do we get back to intimacy that actually means something instead of just sex on the schedule?
This makes me think of duty sex. Sexuality without intimacy feels like rape.
Yeah. What can we actually do to work on actual desirability?
Every time we touch, she sees images of what I did. How do couples push past that mental barrier and find their way back to each other?
Why are we trying to push past? We are quick to want to move through pain without doing the work to resolve the pain.
It's been months, and I still can't bring myself to touch my husband, not because I don't love him, but because my body just shuts down.
It's not like after infidelity, suddenly you become a sexless person.
The penis that touched that other person is not touching me.
They're just putting a Band-Aid on a problem that they don't even understand.
Sex is supposed to be the one place where couples feel the closest, but after betrayal, it's the one place where most couples feel alone. Today, we're talking about sex after betrayal. 4 questions, 1 topic, real answers. Let's get into it.
When infidelity enters the marriage, it doesn't just break the trust, it contaminates the bedroom. The place that was supposed to be the most safe, the most private, the most exclusively yours, that's the very space that's been invaded. And your body knows it even when your mind is trying to move on. For the hurt partner, touch stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like a trigger. Intimacy requires safety, and safety was broken. So when he or she reaches for you and your body shuts down, that's not them rejecting, that's them protecting. For the offending partner, it can go the other direction entirely, wanting intimacy desperately, but not just for the desire, but for fear. Does he or she still want me? Are we okay? Sex becomes more of a measuring stick for survival, and that's the kind of pressure that poisons the process before it even starts. But here's where it gets even more complex, because for some couples, the betrayal didn't just involve someone else. It also involved things that go much deeper. Maybe it's a sex addiction that reframes every memory and every moment of your entire marriage. The threat of a disease that was brought into your body without your knowledge or your consent, or the discovery of sexual preferences that make you question whether he ever truly wanted you at all. These aren't just betrayals of trust. They're the betrayals of your identity, of safety, of your physical body itself. And this is why rushing back into physical intimacy before the real work has been done, it's not the path for healing. It's harmful. And every time you open yourself up physically, before you are emotionally and spiritually ready, you're not building the bridge back to each other. You're adding a new layer of trauma onto a wound that hasn't even closed yet. You're teaching your body that it has to perform in unsafe conditions, and your body will remember that. Sex was never meant to be the proof that your marriage is recovering. It's meant to be the fruit of a healthy and thriving marriage.
Wow, great teaching, Danielle. And I think that really transitions into this first question. So let's dive right in. My wife says she can't be intimate with me because every time we touch, she sees images of what I did. How do couples push past that mental barrier and find their way back to each other?
So first of all, the question in and of itself is interesting, right? Why are we trying to push past? Right? To me, that's problematic because we shouldn't be pushing past anything. We should be trying to work through it. And, I think what's interesting is that we are quick to want to move through pain without doing the work to resolve the pain. And what would help is to understand what's actually happening there, right? Why is she experiencing this? What she's going through actually has a name, and it's called intrusive thoughts or images, right? And this is a totally involuntary response to trauma. It means that her brain is doing exactly what it is designed to do. It's to remind her that this is unsafe and that there was a trauma here, right? And so every time he reaches and gets close to her, the triggered response takes place. Or even before, even the thought or the idea of being close and connected to someone where you experience betrayal can bring on these triggers of intrusive thoughts or images for things that you weren't even present for. That's how magnificent the brain is at doing what it can to protect you. And so really, to answer the question, like, how do we work through this? Because it's really something that you have to work through. And that is to begin by understanding, number one, what's going on, by making peace with the fact that you're not going to be able to touch your way to healing here, right? And oftentimes the unfaithful partner doesn't recognize that. Like they are still operating in a language that no longer works, right? That language no longer works for me to try to connect with you intimately and touching you. Remember how we used to teach, please don't touch me here and here. Don't touch me here and don't touch me here. Touch me here. And so the healing process needs to begin outside of the bedroom. It can't begin in the bedroom. And we need to train people to kind of go backwards and work on winning a person's heart. There was a season in your relationship where you served, you connected, you focused on intimacy in non-sexual ways. And that is going to be the way through consistency, through showing up and through honesty and being that consistently, where that person will begin to trust and those triggers will no longer be needed.
Yeah. Very, very powerful. I think it's interesting how a spouse who touches another person impacts what touch feels like in the marriage. And so for the spouse, for the wife in this case, his touch represents danger. His touch represents betrayal or emotional injury. And so there has to be a process where she disassociates and reassociates what touch even means and looks like. And so once touch becomes introduced back into the relationship, it's got to look different. Like, if he wants to have sex with her, he's got to get comfortable with expressing non-sexual touch. And that non-sexual touch, as we talked about really for years, can't have a goal attached, can't have an agenda attached. It's got to be touch for the sake of touch. And that touch has to represent safety. That touch has to represent connection. And so this is why it's critically important that when a husband touches a wife, it's also associated with emotional connection, effective communication, empathy, care, because then that touch will take on a different meaning. And so I think so many husbands in this particular case are racing through the process to get to what they want. But it's really the way of the tortoise, not the hare. If you know the story of the tortoise and the hare, the tortoise actually won. The hare was speed racing. The tortoise took its time, but in this process, it's going to be a slow and progressive journey to your final destination. And that's something that most husbands have to get in their mind if they really want to win their wife's heart back.
And I think it's another layer to that to understand is, what's happening in the middle. Like, when it's messy, when she does pull away, right? When she is going through a trigger, what does your patience look like? I think a lot of times, because you might, as the former unfaithful, you might be doing the right things now, right? You might be showing up like you've got 100 days, it's just like being an alcoholic. Like, I've been sober 100 days. You got hundreds of days behind you doing the right thing, but she or he is still triggered, right? But it's that consistency of patience that shows up when it's messy in the middle. Because if you understand what happens with a trigger, then you totally get that this is involuntary behavior that was brought on to the person, and this had nothing to do with them. They did not ask for this. They don't want this. This woman does not want to have a replay of the affair. Trust and believe she doesn't want to see this at all. But even though she wasn't there, she's having images of what could have happened and all of that. Every time he touches her, it's reminding her. Well, if you respond negatively, if you respond with impatience, if you respond angry, forget it then, then you're showing her that this is not a safe place for me.
Yeah.
Not only was it not a safe place because of the affair, but now my recovery journey isn't even safe with this person. And that is the key, because you're the closest person to me. I've got to recover with you if I've decided to stay. So you have got to be very intentional to ensure my safety on the recovery journey.
And the other part of this, every time he touches her, her imagination begins to run wild, and she's seen, in essence, her husband touch another woman. And a lot of that has to do with full disclosure, because so many people fail in that very critical step. And they don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. They can't connect all the dots. They don't have all the information. They're forced to use their imagination to make sense of something that's just not making sense. And so they're actually doing their spouse more harm than good, because their imaginations could literally be running wild and create a scenario that's 1,000 times worse than what it actually was.
Listen, that can go down such a rabbit hole, right? Because of how the brain works. Like, really, it's not the person even being forced, right? It's automatic behavior. But imagine that, Imagine that you do know the details. See, this is why it's so important to have the understanding, because knowing too much can also be harmful.
For sure.
Because you are having involuntary triggers. And so oftentimes people want to know more information than they really need to know for their recovery. There are details you need to know, but do you need to know exactly what move and position and all? Do you need to know all of that? Maybe not, because you're giving the brain the information that it needs to create the trauma response to protect you from future harm.
Yeah.
And now you're getting over that. So you're right. Like, the brain is going to come up with a story one way or another, whether it has the real facts or the fake facts. The point is for you to understand that this is happening to your spouse and have the patience and support and kindness to walk with them through something that you put on the table of their lives. You brought this to them. So it's your job to help walk them back.
Absolutely.
We got another question, Hasani. It says, we're physically going through the motions again, but it feels mechanical and empty, like we're just proving we still can. How do we get back to intimacy that actually means something instead of just sex on the schedule? All right, guys, before we get to our final question, we are already preparing for our next episode. So if you have a burning question and would like to see it answered on the next episode, drop it in the comments below. Also, remember that you can catch us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
And if you can resonate with this particular episode because there's been a betrayal in your marriage, and one of the areas that you're struggling with the most is in the area of your bedroom, your sexuality, we encourage you to get the help. This is why we offer the Last Chance Weekend, where couples come together from all over the country to really get into a room and work through the process of what healing and restoration looks like. So every second weekend of the month, in Atlanta, you can join us live in person as we guide you through your recovery process. So check out the description and click on the link to find out more information. This makes me think of duty sex. This makes me think of sex that is highly transactional and not relational. And when it starts to feel mechanical, and when couples come together hoping to develop a level of closeness, but after the sexual experience, they feel more disconnected, this is where you need to incorporate a sex fast, or as we would say, an intimacy challenge. Because obviously sex isn't producing or giving the reward that each person is hoping for in that relationship. And sometimes removing sex from the equation and developing other areas and aspects of intimacy will then make that sexual experience feel a whole lot better. Kind of reminds me of what I heard T.D. Jakes say a long time ago, years ago. It just always stuck with me. He said that sexuality without intimacy feels like rape.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it becomes a very cold, calculating type of experience where people mentally disassociate from the actual experience. And they wind up having contempt and vitriol for a spouse after one of the most closest intimate acts that a couple can actually engage in. So what you said earlier, I think, is key. It's how you show up outside of the bedroom. Because if you connect outside of the bedroom, what you do in the bedroom will feel so much more pleasurable.
I mean, I agree. And I also think that a lot of couples after infidelity move into performance, right? Like, they've committed to each other that they're going to stay together. They've made these announcements with friends and family. There's usually one person in the relationship that wants sexual intimacy and one person that could, take it or leave it, right? And so you're performing to check a box, right? Obviously a need is being met as well. Somebody's need is getting met, but there's a danger to me that's underlying, and that's the person that's just kind of going along to get along. There's a level of triggers that could be taking place here too, where someone is just in constriction mode, right? So, you've become numb and you're just going through the motions because that's what you're supposed to do. And so this is very dangerous, I think, because at the end of the day, conversations need to be had to discuss what can we actually do to work on actual desirability.
Yeah.
There was a time when there was desire. And if you really do believe that your marriage is repairable, you've got to believe that there's something that you can build that's brand new. And so to your point, we talk about the sex fast, which nobody wants to hear sex fast, especially the person that wants to have sex. But, the intimacy challenge is a softer way to say it, right?
I certainly didn't want to hear about it when you introduced the sex. I'm like, no sex.
Right. What a great way to. But so the thing is that you don't realize how much it's one or the other. It's either a tremendous amount of avoidance, right? You're just avoiding each other altogether. You're avoiding eye-to-eye contact. You're avoiding brushing against each other. You're avoiding being alone. You're avoiding being naked around each other, or you're just hyper with it, right? You're jumping into bed every 5 minutes to prove this point. But then there's the truth, which is under the surface. And so, stepping into an intimacy challenge, which kind of gamifies it and brings in a new energy, because remember, we're never going to go back to what we had. So we're focusing on building something new. So bringing in that intimacy challenge takes sex off the table for both.
Yeah.
There's no more performing. There's not one person's need getting met and the other one just going through the motions. It's off the table. Everybody can let their guard down, And so that would be my response to this person, to consider that, because though it might sound scary to the one who wants to get in the bed, it's a tremendous relief to be able to be present with one another and not have expectations.
Absolutely.
There's an expectations. If it's been 7 days, everybody is paying attention to the clock, right? If it's been 7 days since sex, everybody's paying attention. The one that wants it and the one that's avoiding it knows, oh my God, it's been 7 days. Here he's coming, or she. And so that intimacy challenge allows you to shift the energy to connection in all the zillions of other ways that you connected before you ever had sex. Now, I know that's not the case for many people. For a lot of people, they jump right into sex. So they never develop that intimacy. And that's part of the problem. I mean, I talk to couples who literally, they've never had these conversations. They never connected on an intimate level. All they ever had was bodies bumping. And it was a great idea to get married. And so they're operating in reverse. Either way, it's a win.
Yeah, because I think what happens is most people make sex synonymous with intimacy, and it's just one aspect of intimacy. And taking sex off the table allows you to explore all of the other domains
that you don't explore on a regular basis. You just don't, So.
Exactly. All right, let's get to this third question. It's been months, and I still can't bring myself to touch my husband, not because I don't love him, but because my body just shuts down. He wants to be intimate again, and I'm nowhere near close to that. Is something wrong with me, or is this a normal response of betrayal?
It's a normal response of betrayal. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just that your body, which actually does keep score, there's a phenomenal book written about that, is reminding you about the trauma that you experienced and doesn't want you to ever have to experience that trauma again. And so again, it all goes back to these triggers. And this is the thing about triggers, because we're going to be talking a lot about this when it comes to people struggling to get back into the bed, right? Because it's not like after infidelity, suddenly you become a sexless person that wasn't a sexless person before. Those are situations in people's relationships where there's other things, right? But when you had a reasonably healthy sex life before, right? And now all of a sudden, every time your spouse leans towards you, it's like a jump scare.
Mm-hmm.
That is what represents the brain doing its job. And these are the trigger words that we hear people throwing out all the time. I'm triggered, but not really having a full understanding that just because you get mad about something and start doing things reckless doesn't mean that you're triggered. Triggers are involuntary responses that the body puts you into, throws you into without warning, and causes you to shut down to protect, okay? So the question was what?
Is it normal?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's 100% normal, but it's not good to stay in that state, right? So now it gets into, okay, what do we do about these involuntary triggers? But what you need to know in this case is that it is normal. It's a normal process of your recovery if you're doing the recovery work. I think the scariest part is that a lot of couples are dealing with infidelity. They're dealing with all of these triggers. They don't know what to do about it, so they do nothing at all. And that's where it gets into a very dangerous place.
Yeah, I definitely believe that this is normal, but I think everybody's normal is different. And after working with couples for 18 years, you find out that there's 3 typical categories of sexual experiences after a betrayal. Either a couple becomes what we call asexual. There's just zero sex, like the penis that touched that other person is not touching me, right? So you could forget it.
Yeah.
Right. We'll stay married, but this will never happen again. And that presents its own hardship. So it's asexual. So it's like a sexual drought. Okay. Or B, what we find is that people enter into sexual overdrive. And so what happens is, because of fear of loss or fear of rejection or whatever the case may be, they're coming together at just an unbelievable rate, sometimes daily, several times a day, because they're trying to prove something to their spouse. Or maybe the betrayed spouse, who wants it all the time, is competing with the affair partner, right? So there are these phantom competitions that one is having with the affair partner that's driving them. Or sometimes my own low self-esteem and self-worth. I need sex to feel valuable again, or to feel close again, or intimate again. So now sex becomes a tool of control, manipulation, and to meet an emotional need that is really not sustainable. And then third, we see triggered sex. Every time we have sex, I'm triggered, as you mentioned, the jump scare. And so whatever phase you're in, and what we notice is that there's no linear path. Some start out asexual, then become hypersexual. Some start
Which is
out
also a
hypersexual and
trigger.
then go to trigger sex. Yeah, it's
all triggers.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so this is why the approach to every couple has to be different.
Yes.
And if you don't know how to get through this, you need to go with someone who can actually facilitate you through a healing process. So in short, what I would say is that healing is not operated or measured on a calendar. Like, you can't put a timetable to it. Healing is measured by safety. And when safety is brought back into the relationship, then all of a sudden people can begin to open up sexually in ways that they couldn't before.
Absolutely. So we have another question here. It says, since the affair came out, I want to be intimate with my wife all the time. And deep down, I think I'm trying to make sure she won't leave. Am I healing us or just being clingy?
I think it can be both. It depends on the situation. Yes, in this situation, he is being clingy because sometimes when you have an affair, you wake up to the reality, oh my God, my marriage may be at risk. My lifestyle may now be in question. Access to my children, all of these different things can vanish and go away. So in my attempt to hold on and to keep it, I come together physically, emotionally, and sexually to convince my spouse to never leave. So yeah, from that perspective, it's clingy. But what happens is it's actually doing more harm than good. Your attempt to hold on for dear life to your spouse could be the very thing that will cause you to lose them because it's unhealthy. You know what I mean? So this is why there has to be a natural process to restoration and coming back together. And it can't be done solely through sex.
Also, there's no answer in this question about who was unfaithful, right? It just says ever since the affair came out. So, if you were the unfaithful, and you think that I'm going to sex her back into trusting me, sex her back into being open and connected, and sex her back into loving me, I mean, that's way off base. And then also, if she was unfaithful, you're right, now you're trying to sex her to life, right? Because you're thinking that the reason why she stepped out on me was because of the sex, and none of that could be true. So, to me, it's get the answers, right? What are the answers that you need to be able to repair what's broken in your marriage, period. Yeah. And that means you need to get into some great marriage coaching where somebody completely and fully understands exactly where you are and knows exactly the process because it's been blueprinted out for you to get from where you're at to where you need to go. And I think a lot of people they misstep with that, right? They try to resolve it with things in their mind. It's like people just tell themselves stories and then believe it. Do you know what I'm saying? You're operating in total delusion. And for many, that's how they got here in the first place. Mm-hmm. Just never confronting real issues and trying to put a Band-Aid on it. And to me, what this person is doing sounds like they're just putting a Band-Aid on a problem that they don't even understand.
Oh, that was a comprehensive answer to that question. Great episode. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode and you like the topic that we're talking about, but want to go further, there's a whole lot more. So we encourage you to watch the next video, which actually unpacks sexual intimacy after betrayal. So until then, we'll see you on another episode of Marriage Intervention.